you a female entrepreneur that is so hungry to learn and to get that next thing that's going to offer you your next breakthrough? And so you invest in all these programs, you invest in all these coaches and these new skill sets that you are hoping will be your next breakthrough. And they usually aren't. And they end up in your course graveyard, as we all have, I'm sure. And you find yourself kind of blaming circumstances as to why it didn't work for you. Maybe it wasn't the right offer for you, you came to find out, or maybe it wasn't the right timing, or you weren't at the right level, or maybe it was too beginner for you, and you blame the process and the program, and all of that is so normal and it totally makes sense. What I also know to be true is that true transformation, okay, not just a little sprinkle of transformation, true transformation requires a process. And that is called the emotional cycle of change. This emotional cycle of change, it's almost like a skill set. Like if you can learn to go through this process of kind of pushing through what I'm going to tell you about called the valley of despair, that is a skill set that you will take with you forever. That whenever you want to transform and 10x what is possible for you, you know what's coming and you know exactly how to handle it. I want you to think about what I'm going to show you as almost like, if you know someone's about to punch you, you can kind of brace yourself so the punch isn't as painful. That's kind of like what this is. Your experience of transformation can sometimes feel like someone is punching you because your brain loves to stay the same. It loves to think the same thoughts. It loves predictability. It loves homeostasis. And the second, and I mean the absolute second, that you start thinking differently, that you start acting differently, your brain says, whoa, 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 what are you doing? What are you doing? That's not who we are. Come back to where you belong. I want you to imagine being in bed in a Saturday morning and someone brings you a latte, a hot latte. I mean, that's like heaven, right? Your brain is like, you're safe, you're warm, you're comfortable. This is so pleasurable. This is so amazing. And then let's say your spouse walks in and says, all right, honey, it's time for us to go to the gym. And that process of you taking your covers off and changing clothes and getting in the car to go to the gym, your brain is like, don't do this. What are you doing? It was so much better in bed. You were so much happier. It was so much warmer and more cozy. I don't want to do this. I don't want to do this. But you still do it. You say, brain, I hear you. I know you don't want to do this, but even though we don't want to do it, we're still going to do it. And what's so cool is by the time you get to the gym and you're about 20 minutes in, your brain starts to catch up and it says, oh, yes, okay, this is who we are. Oh, okay, yes, this is what we want to be doing. Yes, I'm glad that we're here after we went through that valley of despair. That exact process is the same process that you've got to go through in order to completely be transformed by new things that you're learning, new programs, new offers, new skill sets. And those that are willing to go through it and do it successfully, those are the ones that win. So this is called the emotional cycle of change, and it was developed by Don Kelly and Daryl Connor. And it kind of shows up in a graph form like this. If you're listening to this on a podcast, definitely watch the YouTube video so that you can see what you're working with here. On the left side, this is your emotional state. And on the bottom here is time. And we're going to cut this right in half. And on the top side of the graph, it's optimism. And on the bottom is pessimism. Now, really stay with me here. This is super important. When you enter into the idea that your life is going to be better, you start at phase 1. And phase 1 is called uninformed optimism. Now, this stage feels so good. It's so exciting. And this is usually right after someone buys. Because, and if you're a sales girl, which if you're watching this, you probably are, I want you to notice this for your prospects as well. When they buy from you, they are right here and they're feeling so good. All they can see is the benefits. because you've sold them the benefits, right? That's what sales girls do. We talk about the value and the payoff and what's possible for you on the other side of this offer. And so your prospects are thinking all about the possibilities. What they are not thinking about is the costs that they are going to have to give up in order to reach those benefits. So they're thinking high, like positive, so excited, but they have no idea what is about to come, okay? Once they get up in the process, this is phase 2, and this is informed pessimism, okay? Informed pessimism is when you start really seeing the costs of what it's going to require of you in order to experience the benefits. So think about if you're about to go change your life with a new workout routine, or maybe you plan on running a marathon. In phase 1, you're thinking about crossing that finish line. You're thinking about that 26.2 sticker that goes on the back of your car. You're so excited to take pictures with your medal. Like, that's what you're thinking about. But then your alarm starts going off at 6 a.m. and you're starting to do those 10-mile runs and your shins are starting to hurt. And all of a sudden, it's feeling like it might not be worth it. All of a sudden, the costs are seemingly about to outweigh what the benefits might possibly be. That payoff that you just sold them in phase 1 is starting to drift away. And if you are someone who wants to transform your life, you know exactly what this feels like as well. You get so excited about what's possible, then you start doing the work and you realize, whoa, this is way harder than I expected. Which brings you to phase 3. And this is the valley of despair. This is where most people quit. This is when you start saying things like, oh, it wasn't as bad as I thought it was. Oh man, my old life, it being hard to sell, it wasn't so bad. It was good enough. Not being able to have the energy that I thought eating well would do for me, I'm fine with just average energy. It's good. And so what ends up happening is people will quit here and then they will bounce to something else. They'll bounce back to phase 1 that feels like the new thing that will get them what they want. And that's where the course graveyard starts to pick up. Because this first one that you tried, while it was way harder than you expected, so you quit and bounce to something new and start over. And it makes sense why you want to start over, because remember, it feels so good to stay in phase 1. But what's cool is if you can push through the valley of despair, which is exactly what I'm going to talk about in just a second, how to push through, then you get to phase 4. And this is informed optimism. This is when you start to see the benefits. And this is when you start to experience that payoff that you originally saw for yourself in phase 1. And if you think about, let's say you just start to lift weights, okay? You go to the gym, you have this vision of feeling better and feeling stronger and having so much energy, but when you start working out, you don't feel better. You actually feel so much worse. You feel weaker than ever before. Your body is tired. You're way more hungry. And it's actually harder for you to move around because you're so incredibly sore than it was before you started working out. But if you can push through that, you would eventually get to a place where you're like, oh, I am stronger. I do have more energy. I do feel better. And this is exactly the process of also learning any skill set. I see this with our students all the time. They get to a point where it's almost like this weighing scale, and they go back and forth to it being really hard, and then they have a win, and then it gets really hard, and then they have a win, and then they fail, and then they don't win, and then they do win, and then they don't. It's like this back and forth, but then it just locks in where it's like, oh, I'm winning more than I'm losing. And they start to get a little momentum, which makes them easily go into phase 5, which is success. And what's cool about this phase 5 is once you get to this point right here, what ends up happening is it's actually harder to do it the old way. It takes more effort to do it the way you used to do it than it does to do it the new way that you've just learned. And if you can get through this process and you know how to manage yourself within this valley of despair right here, you can do this with anything. That's why, I love a big goal. And I love focusing on one goal at a time because it forces you to go through this. And then when you have this skill set right here, then and only then will you be able to apply it to the next goal and the next goal and the next goal. And suddenly it just gets easier and easier. And like I said, you can brace yourself as you know you're entering into this valley of despair. And this is kind of what it looks like right here. And I remember hearing someone say, well, not someone say, I actually read this in the book, said that entrepreneurship is all about getting really good at being miserable. I know that sounds terrible, but if you think about what it means to, like, quote, be miserable and what they mean by that quote, I can't remember who said it. I wish I did. But I knew that he was like in the Navy, and so he was bringing his Navy experiences into entrepreneurship. And what he means by that is if you can be in this valley of despair when things feel really hard and you're failing and you do it anyway, that, my friend, is how you consistently transform yourself over and over and over. I want to give you like specific examples of what it feels like to be here because some of you maybe have never even entered fully into the valley of despair. Some of you maybe have dipped your toe in and you go right back up to phase one. But a lot of times what it looks like is just emotion. That's what's really good news. Think about someone having a syringe of an emotion and saying, okay, I'm about to inject you with anxiety. I'm about to inject you with overwhelm. I'm about to inject you with fear. Are you ready? And you're like, okay, yes. And then they inject you with fear and you feel it and then it goes away. It's like not a problem, right? But we make it, all these emotions mean that we need to stop and that we are in danger and that it is too costly to go for your dreams. And it's simply not true. And so I want to give you just some examples for me personally of what this valley of despair looks like. The first thing that it really feels like for me is self-doubt. You know, self-doubt, it's really interesting because when you're transforming identities, your brain makes you doubt yourself that you can handle that identity. So back to the example of getting up out of the bed to go and work out. Your brain is like, this isn't who you are. What are you doing? This isn't your identity. What are you doing? Right? So obviously, self-doubt is naturally going to flare up when you're taking the actions of an identity of who you want to be, not how you see yourself right now. So for me personally, when I experience self-doubt, I say good. I think about self-doubt as like a little friend of mine that I keep in my back pocket and I just take her with me. I do the stuff anyway. In fact, self-doubt is kind of like my North Star. If self-doubt is present, that's how I know I'm transforming and working through into this valley of despair to experience the new identity that I want to have. I think another one is fear. Fear is very similar to self-doubt in that if fear isn't present, we're doing things the same over and over and over and over and over again and therefore not evolving. But fear isn't really fear. I call it fear because I think a lot of you think it's fear, but only real fear can be experienced when there is real and present danger right in front of you. So if there's a bear, you feel fear 100%. But if there's not a real and present danger, all it really is anxiety. And anxiety usually comes from kind of imagining worst case scenario in your brain. Best news about that ever is that it takes just as much energy and effort to imagine worst case scenario for your future as it does a best case scenario. So when I start to feel that kind of anxious, fearful feeling, I notice that it's just me imagining worst case scenario, and I have just as much power and ability to imagine best case scenario. And it's so important to do that because you will walk towards your most dominant thoughts. And you thinking about the future, whatever that future looks like, is 100% what you'll walk towards. Now, I also want to note here that what will end up happening in this valley of despair, like no one says, I am going to quit my journey. I'm going to quit being an entrepreneur. It rarely happens that way. It's usually lots of micro quits. Micro quits being like, this is so confusing. I'm overwhelmed. I'm too tired. There's so much going on. This season is just really hard for me right now. I've got too much on my plate. And while all of those things could or could not be true, those micro quits add up. And I just want to point out the thoughts of being overwhelmed or confused. I know it feels like those things happen to you. I know it feels that way, but they're actually choices. What? I know, they really are choices. These emotions, they're very handy because when you feel overwhelmed and when you feel confused, you can kind of like roll over on your back and say, oh, this is too hard. You kind of over dramatize it. Oh, this is too overwhelming. This is too hard. I'm going to do something else. And for me, I'll tell you what I do. When I feel overwhelmed, I feel myself wanting to do a micro quit by calling my business partner, Kat. That is what I want to do. I want to call her and talk about how this is hard and how it's overwhelming and how I don't know what to do next and what are her thoughts. And it feels like I'm working. It feels like I'm talking to my business partner and brainstorming and strategizing, but really, I just want someone to wallow in the overwhelm with me. Instead of the micro quits, instead of feeling overwhelmed and wanting to stop and do something else, what I have learned to do is to feel the overwhelm and say, oh, it's okay. I'm going to let it be hard. In fact, it has to be hard. In order to transform your brain, it has got to be difficult so you can carry a cognitive load, a level of a cognitive load so that your brain can change. I want you to think about this. When you do something and you mess up and it doesn't go quite as you thought it would, what happens to your brain? It cues up in a different way so that you focus on different things. So let's say you're throwing darts, okay? And you throw a dart and you completely miss it. You throw another dart, you completely miss the bullseye. You throw another dart, you completely miss the bullseye. Eventually your brain's like, okay, let's think about this as a whole. Your brain starts thinking about your elbow placement and your shoulder placement. Starts thinking about your stance and the weight and how are you looking exactly and how hard are you. You start to cue up and think about yourself in totally different ways so that you can hit the bullseye. Same exact thing happens when you're doing stuff differently and you're doing it not quite right and you're messing up and you're hitting walls and you're feeling overwhelmed and you feel like there's a block in front of you can't break through. That is what makes you transform. That's what makes your brain open up and start to solve problems. But I'll tell you what makes it not solve problems is if you stop your work and you call your business partner or you start scrolling or you do those little tasks that are easy to do and they feel like work, even though you and I both know they can be done either by someone else or sometimes they can be completely deleted. So instead, when you feel the overwhelm and you feel the confusion, I just want you to sit there and say, this is going to be hard and I'm going to let it be hard and keep working through. And the second that you start saying, I don't know, I want you to say, if I did know, how would I do this? If I did know the answer, what would it be? Those little moments are what add up and pull you through up into this informed optimism. Because eventually you will hit the bullseye. And eventually, when you do hit that bullseye, you'll realize what exactly the thing was that helped you hit the bullseye. And suddenly, that's what starts happening on autopilot. And that's when you experience the full success. And it's who you are now. And you start all over again with a new skill set. My friend, I hope that this was helpful for you, and I can't encourage you enough to dig back into your course graveyard and pull out the material and the trainings that have probably a lot of really good stuff in there. Courses and programs and offers that I've purchased by far are the thing that has drastically changed my life the absolute most. I live in the course portals that I purchase. I pull them up and I listen to them in the car. I listen to them when I work out. I do listen to podcasts as well, but I love to pull up my courses and listen to them. And I would just encourage you to keep that material top of mind because courses are so amazing because they're packaged in a way that is sequential and can help your brain really consume it in a way that makes it make sense for you, hopefully. And I just can't encourage you enough to get back in there and be willing to go all the way through it. If this was helpful, make sure you subscribe to the channel. We got lots more Sales Girl content coming in, and ultimately we want you to transform into a sales girl so that you become the person that people want to say yes to before they even know your offer. We'll see you in the next one.